From athletes to authors, innovators to icons, we connect with those who help shape the South's culture, revealing the stories of their lives, their journeys, their triumphs and tragedies, what molded them into who they are today. Broadcasting across the Southeast, telling the South stories. This is where their stories live. Authentically off-script and personally illuminating. This is Audibles with Jason Scarborough. This week on Audibles, Mike Bianco.
So your story begins May 3rd, 1967. Yeah, we're going back to the beginning here. Your family originally from Delaware, so you guys ended up in Seminole, Florida. So what happened for you guys to move from Delaware to Seminole?
Yeah, I try to keep that a secret, right? Because I'm really a Yankee, and it's hard to be the head coach of the Ole Miss Rebels when you're a Yankee. But yeah, I was born in Wilmington, Delaware, right outside of Philadelphia. Mom and dad were born in Wilmington. My dad was a college football player and baseball player at the University of Delaware. And like a lot of people, I think of their generation, dad finished, playing there, was team captain, won a national championship there. And back then they didn't have 1 AA, but whatever that would be, at that time. And, started work, got married, had kids. And as luck would have it, my mother's brother, my uncle, was playing professional baseball with the Pittsburgh Pirates at the time. And he was down in Bradenton, Florida with spring training. And so my mom went with her father to go watch her brother in spring training and said, what are we doing living in Delaware? This beautiful place down in Florida. So we ended up landing, so she came home, told my father, hey, let's move to Florida. And amazing, right? As only a young couple with 2 kids, they packed the car up and they drove to Florida. And we landed in Clearwater. And the reason for that was because of the Phillies, Philadelphia Phillies, where, we knew some people of, that's where their spring training site was. So we got to Florida and eventually got to a suburb of St. Petersburg called Seminole. And so that's really where I grew up. I don't really remember the Northeast. We moved when I was about 5. And so I grew up in a suburb of St. Petersburg called Seminole, Florida. How would you describe yourself as a child growing up? That's a tough question. I don't know how anybody describes themselves growing up. I was a typical kid. I played sports. I was, an average student. Played football, baseball, and basketball. As you can tell, height-wise, my basketball career ended probably in 8th grade. But played football and baseball at Seminole High School. And for a couple of years, I played football. Really enjoyed it, but then this fall baseball started becoming pretty prominent. And I felt like I was missing too much baseball, so started playing fall baseball. My senior year, when it really came time to decide where you were going to go to school after that, I wasn't really getting recruited by anybody that really interested me. So I decided to go to junior college, and I went to a place called Indian River Community College, which is in Fort Pierce, Florida, about 100 miles north of Miami, right up the East Coast. So for the people that don't know, it's Seminole, Clearwater, St. Pete is all on the Gulf Coast, right? The West Coast, Tampa Bay side. So I went to junior college across the state. Almost due east, right across the state, about 3 hours. Played junior college baseball for 2 years there, and then got recruited by Louisiana State University. And to be honest with you, I didn't even know where Louisiana was. I never left the state of Florida, so I knew it was over near Texas somewhere. But I did know of their coach, a guy by the name of Skip Burtman. And the reason I knew Coach Burtman was that he was from Miami. He was an assistant coach at the University of Miami in the late 70s and early 80s, and was there when Miami won their national championship. And then he took over the program at LSU in 1984, if I'm not mistaken. And so this is like the fall of 1986. And so they're in the Southeastern Conference. They got this young, hot coach, at the time, and decided to go to LSU.
You mentioned Indian River Community College. How would you frame that experience before going to LSU, playing there at Indian River?
Well, terrific, and really nothing to compare it to. You know, going to junior college, playing baseball after high school. You know, you knew that pyramid of success, was getting steeper and steeper. Where, all the kids that started when you were little league, and then senior little league, and then high school, there was less and less people. And then even, after high school, now you're playing junior college, there's not as many kids. We at Indian River, it was a different level of baseball. You could tell, we were playing against much better talent. Coaching wise, Mike Easom was my coach there, and Coach Easom was a star at Florida State. Also coached minor league baseball in the summer times in a rookie league up in Montana. And so, we were getting some great coaching, playing against some great competition. So much different. And of course, you're in college. A little different feel. It's not like, going to a big, university like Ole Miss. But, you had to get up on your own. You had to go to class. It was different for sure. But an experience that, of course, I really enjoyed and felt benefited me.
You mentioned going to LSU. You transferred there in 1988. So you mentioned Skip Bertman, hot, young, new coach at the time at LSU. Was there another reason or something else with LSU that made it attractive to you, something other than, of course, Coach Bertman?
Well, I think playing in the Southeastern Conference, and at the time, it's a little embarrassing to say, but I don't think I was much different than most of the kids in the sense that I wanted to go to college, but I didn't know the difference between an education at Florida, LSU, or Florida State. I wanted to get a degree. That was important to me. Nobody in my family had ever graduated from college, so I was going to be hopefully the first one on either side of my family to graduate from college. But beyond that, it was going to play at a really good baseball school with a really good coach. The campus, in Baton Rouge is beautiful, and but I think probably what attracted me most was the coach, the conference, and of course a program that had just come off, 2-3 months before that when I started getting recruited, the 1986 their first College World Series appearance. So a team that was having a lot of success at the time.
So you talked about playing under legendary coach Skip Bertman. So I got to ask, the first meeting you had with Coach Bertman, what was that like?
Individual meeting?
Yeah.
Wow. I don't know if it's the first time that I ever met with him one-on-one. Obviously, that probably happened, during our recruiting visit. That was some time ago. I do remember one of my first individual meetings. We have these player conferences. We still do here at Ole Miss, where the coaches split up the players and they meet with them individually, kind of like a conference. And you go over your grades, you go over your housing situation, and then the last component of the conference is your baseball progress. And I remember sitting with Coach Bertman, and you know how stories exaggerate over years, so I'll try not to exaggerate it. But I remember him, this is the first fall, and he said, "Hey, listen, Mike, you don't throw as well as I thought you would, and offensively you have to, you can't strike out as much. So you got this big loop in your swing, and anyway." Long story short, after that conference, I was like, wow, I don't even know if I'm going to end up playing here. But that's how Coach Bertman was. He was such, back in his day, he was so good at being able to challenge you, to knock you down, but he was so good, and people know it today, and it's so much, it's discussed so much in his new book that just came out about how motivational he can be. And but I remember walking out of that player conference going, wow, I'm not sure if I'll ever play here. He doesn't think I'm very good. But fortunately, I had that wrong. I got to play a lot there.
That 1989 team that you were on, that LSU team, I'm going to have to cheat and look down at some of my stuff here. You were the team captain, starting catcher for that LSU team that made it to Omaha. That was the fourth trip in Coach Bertman's first 5 seasons at LSU. And you called for one of the most dominating pitching staffs or pitching rotations probably in SEC history, if not college baseball history. That team started a streak of 17 consecutive postseason appearances for LSU baseball. That '89 team also won a super regional against Texas A&M. Many consider that Texas A&M team one of the greatest teams, if not the greatest team, to ever take the field. That team wasn't able to bring home a championship, but there's so much that was accomplished during that season. Is there an accomplishment on the field that maybe doesn't get the ink that maybe you think it deserves, that you're proud of?
Well, first, let me correct you. They didn't have, because we don't want to date, they didn't have super regionals back then. They didn't start the super regional era, I think, until like 98, 99.
I'm from the super regional era, so, yeah.
You're a young guy. So that was maybe a decade later, but it was a regional. So back then, they didn't even have 64 teams, it was 48 teams. And they were 8 6-team regionals. So the winners of those 8 regionals got to go to Omaha. But you are correct in saying that we went to College Station. It was at a time where we had a really good year. As you mentioned, we had so many great players and so many guys that ended up playing in the big leagues, and most notably, Ben McDonald, but other great ones as well. And we thought we were going to end up hosting our own regional. And then when we knew we didn't get a regional site, they always kept a kind of an at-large regional up in the Northeast, and a lot of times in Connecticut or up in that area, just I think to regionalize the regionals, if you will. And we ended up not going to there either, and ended up being a number 2 seed in College Station, having to face one of the greatest, if not the greatest, regular seasons of all time. I think they were 55-5 when the season was over, but by the time we played them, they were 58-5 and had beaten like their opponents in the 3 games of the regional to that point, something like 66 to like 6, and we had the daunting task, to have to beat them twice, and we did. In the first game, Ben McDonald pitched, and obviously was Ben at his best and handled them, and we ended up winning the first game. The second game went into extra innings, doubleheader, and I just remember it being a really long day, and it was kind of that David and Goliath story, because this was before, although LSU had some success, didn't have the notoriety of, a lot of teams, since then that played at LSU. And so we had won there. Bertman often, calls it his 6th national championship. So he won 5 and, to win there. And unfortunately for us, that was, the greatest moment I ever had playing baseball, and, just a cool accomplishment. But probably unfortunately for us, we probably used up so much emotion and energy in there that we didn't play as great in the College World Series. We ended up winning 2 games. We were 2-2, and I think came tied for 3rd. And we were probably good enough, like a lot of teams every year in baseball, but just didn't play well enough in Omaha to finish the deal. But certainly, that College Station regional was the highlight of my baseball career.
Today's conversation is brought to you in part by Farm Families of Mississippi, reminding us that every meal starts on a farm.
Mississippi farmers raise over 800,000 head of cattle each year. We take care of our livestock so you get what's good for your family on your table. We are only one of thousands, but we are united as one to grow the food, fiber, and shelter you need every day. Mississippi needs farmers. The Farm Families of Mississippi.
Hey, it's me, Gus the Gopher for Atmos Energy. I dig all around the yard. Occasionally, I bump into a utility line and get a headache. But if you hit one with your shovel, backhoe, or ditch digger, you could cause a gas leak, disrupt service, or worse. So call 811 at least 3 business days before you or someone else digs in your yard to have those underground utility-owned lines marked. It's free and it's the law. You dig what I'm saying? For more on safe digging, visit atmosenergy.com/811.
Family owned and operated since 1986, Lakeside Molding has become the trusted source of architectural products throughout the South. They offer fine interior architectural moldings, custom millwork, and cabinet doors designed and handcrafted in Flowwood. Their showroom on Lakeland Drive is stocked with today's most sought-after interior details, including corbels, post, fireplace mantles, bath vanities, mirrors, and much more. Tim Shoemaker and his staff work closely to meet client needs for new construction, restoration, and remodeling projects. Lakeside Molding, where details make the difference.
Is cooking your passion? Do you love to bake? Do you want to be a chef? You need to check out Culinary Arts at Holmes CC. When the affordable tuition you need meets the technical skills you want, that's when you know you're a Bulldog. A Holmes Community College Bulldog. Enroll today at holmescc.edu.
When it comes to concrete work in Central Mississippi, trust a name built on generations of craftsmanship. Nico Concrete Contractor. Nico is a third-generation concrete professional with over 30 years of hands-on experience and more than 20 years in business right here in Brandon. From residential driveways and patios to commercial parking lots, metal building foundations and retaining walls. If you want it done right the first time, call Nico Concrete Contractor. Built on experience, built to last. Audibles continues with support from Farm Families of Mississippi, where agriculture meets everyday life.
So you finished at LSU 1989. So what were your expectations or goals? What were your ambitions coming out of LSU in 1989?
Well, you know, I tell the story often that, you know, during my senior year, I remember I used to work Coach Burtman's camps, and I remember him at one of the road trips, we were flying somewhere, flew commercially, and so Bianco, Burtman, you know, Bees, we were, you know, he was usually in first class. He must have not been able to get bumped up that time, and so I was sitting next to him, and I remember him asking me, you know, because I used to work his camps, he said, "You're going to be a coach, you know, when you graduate." And I said, "Oh, no, sir." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, you guys don't make enough money." And of course, he laughed. And I went back home after graduating, and I got a job with a company called First Investors Corporation as a financial planner. I worked there for 2 months and absolutely hated it. Every day, putting on a coat and tie, driving across the bridge to Tampa, and just it was miserable. And remember my wife and my father say, "You know, why don't you want to be a coach?" And I was like, "Oh, there's so many coaches, and it's too hard, and you know, everybody wants to do this, but you know, how do you get an SEC job? How, you know, that's going to be difficult." And I remember them challenging me in a lot of different ways. I remember my wife saying, "Why are you so sure that you can't get one of those jobs? You know, like, it's so hard to be a college baseball player, but you never doubted that you would do that. Why are you so sure that you won't make it in baseball?" And I had nothing else to do at the time. Nothing else was really, you know, I think intriguing to me. So I called up Jim Wells in Natchitoches, Louisiana, who had just taken over the head job at Northwestern State. He was a graduate assistant at LSU when I played, and called him up and I said, looking for a job, and Coach Burtman said, "You might have a graduate assistant job opened up," and 2 months later, I'm coaching in Natchitoches, Louisiana.
Do you ever look back at that conversation with your wife and think, my goodness, what if she hadn't said that to me? Was that kind of the push you needed to pursue coaching now that you look back at it?
I don't tell her that.
I think I just told her.
Yeah. It's not that I didn't think I could be a coach. I just didn't know, do you want to do that the rest of your life? And, you know, when you're a young person, as I mentioned, you know, one of the earlier, you know, questions, I think a lot of times as a young person, you're listening and you're hearing but you don't always get it. I remember people growing up, hey, don't worry about money, don't worry about that. Find your passion, find something you enjoy. You're gonna be doing it for the next 40, 50 years of your life. You need to find something that you enjoy doing. And I heard all of that, but I think you're like, yeah, sure, gosh, but no, I need to be a gazillionaire, right? I need to find a job that I'm going to be super wealthy. But guess what? It's really hard to be successful at something you don't have passion for and you don't enjoy. And so certainly the conversation with my wife, will give her credit, probably pushed me over the hump to be a baseball coach.
You mentioned that experience with Jim Wells at Northwestern State. In light of what just happened in June, winning the national championship, do you ever look back, or have you ever looked back at that experience? How valuable, when you look back now, how valuable was that experience?
All of those, not just that, but, I think as you get older, and not just reminiscing, I think, I look back and how fortunate I was that my parents landed in Florida. I didn't grow up in Wilmington, Delaware. If I would have grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, there's no doubt, I probably wouldn't have played college baseball. My father was a football player. He played baseball in college, but, in the Northeast, especially in the 80s, it was tough to be a college baseball recruit. And so you look at a lot of different moments in your life and how they all kind of fit, to make you the person that you are today. And certainly that time in Natchitoches with Jim Wells, where he was a young coach and he had taken over a program that had 10 consecutive losing seasons. This will show you how great Jim Wells was. He got to Natchitoches, and like I said, 10, that's a decade of losing. And in his first year, I think he won 38 games. In his second year, my first year, we win like 42 games, win the Southland Conference Championship, and go to a regional, I think maybe for the first time in the history of the school. And in 5 years in Northwestern, he won 3 conference championships and then went to 3 regionals, and then became the head coach at the University of Alabama, and retired around 2009, I believe, as the all-time winningest coach at the University of Alabama. He was a guy that just loved to coach the game, and I learned that from him, that you can coach it and make a difference. Recruiting's awesome, and all the people say that recruiting's the lifeblood, and it is. But he was a coach's coach. I mean, he loved to coach. He loved to coach all different aspects of the game, and I think that really got me hungry for coaching. My time there.
So you talk about that experience at Northwestern, but then in the 90s, for a period of time, you get to go back and coach with Coach Burtman, your mentor. How did that experience shape your coaching career now that you've had some opportunities to reflect back?
You've heard the phrase timing is everything. Well, this was perfect timing. And so, my first stint with Coach Burtman as a player, we had a lot of success on the field, but they weren't the team that a lot of people, when you talk about LSU baseball now, especially young people, even people of your generation, this is kind of when it all started. They had just won their national championship, or their first national championship, in 91. I got there in the summer of 92. I was there for 5 years. We went to the College World Series 4 times and won 3 national championships, so it was perfect timing. But I tell this often that the thing that I'm most fortunate about those 5 years, and even though that we won 3 national championships and tons of rings and wins and fond memories, the thing that I'm most fortunate about is I got to learn his system up close and personal. And Burtman, coach just had a way where he was just so much different than any other coach that I've ever come across, even since then. He was a great coach. He was a great tactician. I mean, he could teach the game, but he also realized that there was more to that, to developing a program, and that's where I was fortunate. I got to learn, why we had more people at our games than everybody else. And people think it's winning, and that happens in football and basketball. There's a lot of programs that win in baseball that don't draw, and so there's a method to the madness. And he was worried about things. He was worried if the coffee was hot in the concession stand. He was worried if the view was obstructed in the stands. He was worried about different things in the program that people, normally and even today would say, hey, stay in your lane, just coach the team. He knew that to develop this, full service program, as he would say, and one that not only won, but, was able to lead in attendance and everything else, that you had to be a CEO. Like, you had to know what was going on in all aspects of the program, not just the baseball, but the marketing, the ticketing, the fundraising, all those types of facilities. And I learned that was important, that you had to be able to do that. And obviously, that I took that when I left to become the head coach at McNeese State. It was more than just bunt defenses and teaching a guy to hit or to pitch. Those things are important, and those are what get you to the office. Nobody wants to become a coach to recruit or to build facilities or to worry about attendance. Everybody wants to work with young people and teach the game, but if you want the big program, if you want to be able to have the great facilities and have great attendance and those types of things, you got to be that full service program.
You talk about McNeese State you were 30 years old when you got to that's young even by today's standards. Do you ever look back and say, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? I mean, 30 years old is young to be a head coach.
Back then I'd been assistant, for I guess 7 years, and thought I was getting old. I just turned 30, and so when you're a young person, you turn 30, you think you're getting old. And I had, as the old song goes, thank God for unanswered prayers. I'd applied and lost out. I was, came in second place on a few jobs before then, or I would have been a head coach, well before I was 30 years old. But finally, at 30 years old, I felt at the time, I got hired by McNeese State. Much like Northwestern State and Jim Wells, they had struggled the last couple of years, and so took that, as Bertman would call it, the franchise. Took that system to Lake Charles and tried my best to do it and kind of mesh the two, the Jim Wells, the blue collar, build the program, cut your own grass, paint your dugouts, but also with the full service program. You got to have your booster club. You got to go talk to the Rotary and Kiwanis clubs and sell season tickets and get people to the game, and tried to mesh both of those two, I guess, philosophies, or my two stints, right, as a coach. My two mentors, and Jim Wells and Skip Bertman, tried to mesh two of those together to have success, at McNeese State.
Support for Audibles comes from Atmos Energy, helping to fuel homes across the South with safe, reliable, natural gas. We'll be right back.
From the seed, and the soil grows row after row. We take care of this land, using just the right amount of our natural resources, and never more than we need.
We are only one of thousands, but we are united as one to grow the food, fiber, and shelter you need every day. Because Mississippi needs us. Mississippi needs farmers, the farm families of Mississippi.
Hey, it's me, Gus the Gopher for Atmos Energy. I dig all around the yard. Occasionally, I bump into a utility line and get a headache. But if you hit one with your shovel, backhoe, or ditch digger, you could cause a gas leak, disrupt service, or worse. So call 811 at least 3 business days before you or someone else digs in your yard to have those underground utility-owned lines marked. It's free and it's the law. You dig what I'm saying? For more on safe digging, visit atmosenergy.com/811.
When it comes to concrete work in Central Mississippi, trust a name built on generations of craftsmanship. Nico Concrete Contractor. Nico is a third-generation concrete professional with over 30 years of hands-on experience and more than 20 years in business right here in Brandon. From residential driveways and patios to commercial parking lots, metal building foundations and retaining walls. If you want it done right the first time, call Nico Concrete Contractor. Built on experience, built to last.
Is cooking your passion? Do you love to bake? Do you want to be a chef? You need to check out Culinary Arts at Holmes CC. When the affordable tuition you need meets the technical skills you want, that's when you know you're a Bulldog. A Holmes Community College Bulldog. Enroll today at holmescc.edu.
Welcome back to Audibles, presented in part by Atmos Energy, natural gas, the smart energy choice for your home.
So you're rolling at McNeese State, having a lot of success, and then the opportunity comes up to come here to Ole Miss. What did you know about Ole Miss baseball before you came here?
When this job came open, it was almost two sides of the spectrum. One, I was excited because I wanted to coach in the SEC. I wanted to coach, at that time there was only 12 schools, and so there's only 12 of these jobs in the world. And so when you look at it that way, you go, wow, what an opportunity. But they hadn't had a lot of success, and that was the other side of the spectrum. Is, I think they had only been to postseason twice in 25 years, and so that scared me, to be honest with you. That scared me because I knew in baseball it was different than football, basketball. You usually got one shot at it, and it's still kind of true today. Once you become a head coach, if you don't have success, they don't recycle like they do in football, the head coaches in baseball. They don't become offensive coordinators and then back to a head coach or go to another program. Baseball, you usually get one shot at it. And so you better make that shot a good one. And so the perception, I think, at least what I thought around the country as far as Ole Miss is concerned, is they didn't really matter to compete in the Southeastern Conference. It was a neat campus, great college town, nestled up in the northwest corner of Mississippi, but they had a nice stadium. But a lot of people think that it was probably built because Mississippi State built a stadium in 1985. So ironically, this stadium was built in 1988, 89. It was his first year that opened. But when I came on the interview, I met the then athletic director, John Schaefer. We flew into the Memphis airport. If you've ever flown to Memphis and then drove to Oxford, Mississippi, or into Mississippi, you realize the state line is about 2-minute ride. And so before we got to Mississippi, in those 2 minutes, I remember John Schaefer turning to me, and my wife, Cammie, was with me at the time, and he said, I think our best shot to win a national championship is in baseball. And of course, that resonated with me because that's all I've ever been a part of. Everywhere that that's all we talked about was going to Omaha and winning a national championship. And the thing that I was worried about was, did they care about that? And for the athletic director to say that so quickly to me meant something. And so fortunately, about 5 days later after the interview, he called me up and offered me the job. And it's been a neat ride.
I've heard you talk a lot about buy-in when you first started here at Ole Miss, and that buy-in, it seems like you try to get people to buy in every year. What was the biggest challenge for you when you first came to Ole Miss to get that buy-in? What was the biggest challenge for you?
I think baseball's different, as I mentioned earlier, and it's a great game and it's popular, but it's one of those sports where it's different than football. That in the SEC, if you win in football, the people are going to show up. If you win in basketball, the people are going to show up. In baseball, it's not always that way. And so you had to sell your program. And so, when I first got here, one of the things I did was, look up, in the Chamber of Commerce, all the different civic organizations, the Rotary clubs and the Kiwanis clubs within about 30-mile radius, and sent them all emails saying that because they always need a speaker once a week. They have meetings once a week. That I'm available, and had our sports information director and ticket office, type up a season ticket brochure that would explain, and talk about the team, and have an application there, so you'd have something to pass out when you went and speak to these people, and we started doing that. I remember getting frustrated early where I had one of the first battles I won was, hey, they used to sell SEC package baseball. season tickets. I was like, why would you do that? And they go, well, nobody wants to come until after basketball anyway. And I said, well, certainly, because you're selling them a cheaper season ticket. How are we ever going to get anybody to come opening day if that's not even, a ticket in some of the season ticket packages? We need, they need to have a ticket for every game, or we're actually giving them an excuse not to come. And so we stopped doing that. And can you imagine that, in non-conference games and weekday games, they didn't even let people come into left field. We had to talk them into unlocking the gate and pay a security guard and a ticket person out in left field to let the people come in. I always envisioned, the old stadium that was built in 1989 that had just under 3,000 seats. I remember talking to Pete Boone, the athletic director after a few years when I was here, about we're going to build the stadium down along that hill. That's going to be grandstands. People won't be sitting in lawn chairs with their back of the legs of the chairs cut off anymore. There, we're going to build. You're going to have to do it. And again, I think you have to have that vision. You got to have that belief in anything, and not just a coach, but in anything that you do and in any industry that you're in. But I always saw that. College baseball is such a neat game. But you got to get the people here. I was amazed, and still sometimes I'll ask today, who's not been to Swayze Field? Now, early on, it was amazing to me. Oxford's a town that you can get anywhere in 5 minutes, and how many people have never been to a baseball game here? I was, just astonished. And so, but it doesn't take a lot just to ask them. Just show up. It's affordable. It's great. It's family entertainment. And it's for some families, not just the price, but it's better for them as a family because the kids can run around and be in a playground. It's different than going to a football game or basketball game where the kids have to sit in their seats the entire game. And so, a lot of people found their niche, in left field or somewhere in the stadium where this really worked for them. And then it would build. We live in that lottery generation where, it's not going to just happen overnight. It's not going to just be in one game or one speech, one season ticket brochure. That we just gradually, each year our attendance, continued to increase and break attendance record every year, season ticket record every year. And the athletic department kind of caught on, and, they started to realize, and certainly when you start to host regionals and those types of things, when you're hosting events, NCAA tournaments that lead to the College World Series, it's a lot easier to have the buy-in.
So June 26, 2022, that's the date you're going to remember for the rest of your life. Ole Miss fans, Ole Miss faithful, remember for the rest of their life. You're going into Game 2. You guys had already beaten Oklahoma pretty soundly in Game 1 of the College World Series Finals. And going into that Game 2, going to be a deciding Game 2 if you guys win. What are you telling your staff? What are you telling the player? What was your message to everybody that day?
Well, I think when you get to that point, you just want to play well, right? You want to be your very best when it means the most. And I remember the last message before we walked out of the meeting room, and we would meet on the second floor, and then we would go down the stairwell, and then actually it would have been easier just to turn right and get to the bus, but we would walk through the lobby. And with each game, more and more people showed up. I don't know how many. It's hard to, calculate, how many people were there, because I thought there was a lot the first game that we played there. But we would walk through the lobby and high five all the fans, and they would kind of have a pathway all the way to the bus. And with each day, more and more people, and you didn't just notice it there. I think that was our vantage point, but you could see it all around Omaha with each day. More and more, Rebel fans showed up. But my message to them right before we walked out, on that Sunday, was that, obviously, we got to that point and it was a neat season, and a lot of people have showed up. We're about to high five, a lot of people before we get on the bus. And most of them, if not all of them, think that they got to Omaha or came to Omaha to see you win a national championship. But what they've really done is they've fallen in love with this story. You know, they've fallen in love with this story of not this rags to riches, not this Cinderella story, because that wasn't us. You know, we were a team that was preseason ranked in the top 5. We were a team that at one point in the middle of the season, starting conference play, we were ranked number 1 for 2 consecutive weeks. But this was a story about a team that was once good that fell down and fell into this hole and got up and started playing well again, and here they are, you know, on you know, about to win a national championship, and what they continue to do was to believe in one another and continue to work hard. And you know, we've all heard that our whole life. We've read it, you know, on a poster in a doctor's office, or your parent or a coach has told you, you know, if you continue to work hard and you continue to believe, you know, good things will happen to you. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't believe that. They've been told that, you know, but they don't believe that. And here, these kids were living that. And I think people kind of fell in love with that story, to watch this story of a team that was good, that fell down, handled it, came back on the other end, and kept believing in one another until they got out of that hole. And what a neat story.
Brandon Johnson gets the strikeout, the dog pile ensues. And I've seen the clip of you in the dugout with the fist pump, an emotional moment. And on the field that day in the celebration, off camera, you were emotional several times, and rightfully so. Ole Miss baseball national champions, when you hear that now that you kind of had some time to kind of digest it and reflect, what emotions, what thoughts come to your mind?
It's just hard. It's hard to put into words. It's hard to, you know, it's because I think the feelings and emotions touch on go in a lot of different directions. So I think it's hard to, you know, just encompass in, you know, a couple sentences. You know, I think I was amazed afterwards, and especially for a few days afterwards. It's always been my goal as a head coach, but it's the goal of every head coach to take his team to Omaha and win a national championship. Obviously, it's a goal of the teams. And so we knew it was our goal, and we knew that we had great fans and great fan support. I didn't know how important it would be for them. I knew it would be neat for them. I knew everybody wants to be a champion. And again, another culture and society where it's, you know, what have you done for me lately? And, the next day they move on to something else. But it touched these people. It touched the Ole Miss family. And I mean it as a compliment. But I guess I was, you know, I think I've been kind of amazed and overwhelmed at how much it's meant to people that don't even follow baseball every year, or don't, you know, aren't season ticket holders, that, you know, because they're an Ole Miss Rebel, they're a national champion. And that's been a really cool thing for me, I think, you know, especially a few days, you know, just after the championship. You know, obviously from a personal level, as I just mentioned, I think, you know, to be at the pinnacle, to be, you know, at the top of your profession, even for that brief moment, is really cool. And it's what you're hopeful, but, you know, it doesn't, you know, and it sounds like coaches speak, but a few days after that, you realize that, you know, you're talking to recruits. Well, these kids that you're talking to, they don't have a ring, or not getting a ring. They don't have the national championship trophy. They're coming here to do that again. And so I think as a coach and as a coaching staff, it's easy to get refocused back into, okay, that's great and that's awesome. We'll have that memory. And we could always relive it. We can watch the videos and we can do that, and that's great. And I think that's healthy and that's good. But your day job says you got to go back to work the next day, right? And you got to go, you know, try to win the next national championship. So, you know, I don't think we've had a problem in this office of, you know, being where our feet are, and our feet aren't in Omaha anymore, and they're not on that national championship stage.
From our view on this farm, food security is national security. Our nation must have a sustainable food source. Keeping the supply chain moving and food on our grocery store shelves by growing the cleanest food in the world.
We're only one of thousands, but we are united as one to grow the food, fiber, and shelter you need every day because Mississippi needs us. Mississippi needs farmers, the farm families of Mississippi.
Hey, it's me, Gus the Gopher for Atmos Energy. I dig all around the yard. Occasionally, I bump into a utility line and get a headache. But if you hit one with your shovel, backhoe, or ditch digger, you could cause a gas leak, disrupt service, or worse. So call 811 at least 3 business days before you or someone else digs in your yard to have those underground utility-owned lines marked. It's free and it's the law. You dig what I'm saying? For more on safe digging, visit atmosenergy.com/811.
I'm going to switch gears on you just a little bit. I've heard you in past interviews talk about the song by Garth Brooks. You referenced it a while ago, Unanswered Prayers. Why does that song mean so much to you and mean what it does to you?
I've never been asked that, and I don't know if it means that much to me. I think it's fair to say it happens in everybody's life. I remember when that song came out, and I remember, at that time I wasn't engaged, but I was at that stage where a lot of guys have, where I was getting ready to get engaged, to get married, and I was thankful that I was going to marry the woman of my dreams, and now 30 years later we're still married with 5 kids. But you have girlfriends before that, and thank God for unanswered prayers, just like the song goes. But I think there's moments through your life that's like that, where you think you think that you know your path. You may know your destination, but we surely all don't know our path, right? And what bumps in the road. Nobody thought that this team was going to win a national championship, and probably at times we didn't think that. We're just trying to be where our feet are and win the next game. And I think if you look and you say, hey, how are you going to win a national championship? Draw it up. Nobody draws the roadmap that this team in 2022 went. At least you wouldn't have enough guts to write it that way. It's 7-14 in the SEC, with 3 weeks remaining. And so I think, thank God for unanswered prayers, that, depending on how devout you are in your faith, a lot of times our life goes in directions that we didn't think it would go, and we're thankful for it.
Final question for you. If you could go back and talk to 20-year-old Mike Bianco, how do you think that conversation would go?
Wow. That's a tough one. We went for all these easy questions, and then you throw the bombshell at the end. I don't know. Would I change things? Maybe I wouldn't have done the financial planning and all of that, but as I just said, that contradicts the good and the bad, right? To this point, hopefully my ride's not over. Hopefully my ride's got several years in front of it. There's good and bad, and I think where I am now, it's hard to say that those tough moments, whatever they were at the time or what we thought was tough, hopefully make you better and help you appreciate the good times. And so maybe the best thing you could say is just continue to work hard and continue to try to do things the right way, and trust the path. Trust that things are usually happen in your life for a reason. We don't always know it, and again, much easier said than done. But just trust it. Continue to try to enjoy it every single day, and do the best that you can.
An incredible career at Ole Miss, and I want to say again to you, congratulations on being a national champion. And you didn't have to sit down with me, but I appreciate you sitting down with me for Audibles, and I hope we get to do this down the road after you win your next championship, right?
My pleasure, Jason. Exactly. The next one.
Good to see you, Coach. Thanks. I'm watching it. They see probably you won't even watch your own interview? Maybe not.
Probably not. Unless I say something where I go, hey,
That's
Jason,
pretty good.
you need to take that out of here. Make sure that you did take it out of there.
I'm often guilty of saying something that I probably should take out. Yeah.
Real stories, real legends. The South's own storytelling show. Join us next week for another episode of Audibles with Jason Scarborough.